Testing. Test. Is Cheryl, are you around? Cheryl Wang from SUSS. Testing.
Okay. Hello. Hey. Okay.
All right. Can I just check on the Facebook stream? Hang on 1 second. Is anyone still outside the door? Yeah, just move in. So try to squeeze to the sides. Just get yourself into the room. 1 second. Let me just check on the stream. Feedwork, okay. Okay, all right. I believe the live stream has started. Okay, so thank you everyone for making it all the way down to Science Park here. Yeah, my name is Sean. I'm the co-founder of DigixGlobal, as well as the lead organizer for Ethereum Singapore. So I see a lot of familiar faces here. Thank you for coming around on extremely short notice. But the biggest thank you goes to Vitalik and his crew for actually making this trip down here. Yeah. So without further ado, I'll just allow Vitalik himself to actually go through what we have to hear today. So I prepared like a short write-up of this event. We will be covering on the preview for what we want to expect from Ethereum for this year, as well as all the existing projects that's been ongoing, such as like Casper, Proof of Stake, and after which, Carl. So Carl is here. Carl will be doing a 15-minute or 20-minute session around his plasma tutorial. Yeah, so let's give a very warm Singapore welcome to Vitalik.
Warm welcome to Carl. Okay, so to get right into it, as I'm sure people who have been following Ethereum for a while know, one of the big things that we are working on, and that's really been picking up over the last year or so, is Casper. And Casper is basically Ethereum's kind of like it's a family of algorithms, of proof-of-stake consensus algorithms that we have been researching over the last 2 or 3 years or so, and that we expect to implement into Ethereum. So up until about a year and a half ago, there wasn't really an algorithm called Casper. It was just a kind of completely theoretical set of ideas that we were thinking about. But over the course of the last year or so, we finally have solidified on a couple of different specific directions. So there's 2 versions of Casper. One is Casper FFG, Casper the friendly finality gadget, and there's another version called Casper CPC, which is a correct by construction Casper. Though FFG is a more kind of quick, easy to implement, shorter term protocol that is primarily worked on by myself, and Casper CPC is a more kind of abstract. So Casper, the friendly finality gadget, I won't go into the tech too deeply, but if you want to learn more about the tech, then if there's a bit of extra time, maybe Carl can show a few slides from that tutorial as well. I don't know. That in November last year, Virgil and myself published the Casper-friendly finality gadget paper. Yay! It's a PDF, it's in LaTeX, therefore it's legit. So basically, like as the abstract says, this is basically this kind of branch of research that combines together a lot of thinking in kind of chain-based proof-of-stake algorithms together with like slasher-style proof-of-stake secured by penalties and deposits, together with traditional Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus research. And like basically the result is that we've created something which makes sense both as a kind of full chain-based proof-of-stake algorithm with better properties, and an overlay that can be put on top of proof-of-work to basically have a proof-of-work chain that gets secured by proof-of-stake. And also, if you want, it technically is a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithm, so you can use it for like anything that you would use that for. And in my own totally not humble opinion, it's like 3 times simpler than PBFT. So this is second fun milestone. As of 2340 on December 31st, 2017, Casper FFG has a testnet. And we basically implemented a real live implementation of Casper FFG on top of the PyEthereum node in Python. And you have a node, you have a network, you have nodes that talk to each other. Unfortunately, PyEthereum's networking turned out to be not very good, and so we basically required a lot of manual efforts to keep reconnecting these nodes to each other. The good news is that despite this self-inflicted multi-hour latency, the Casper network still held together, which is exactly what you'd expect because this algorithm is supposed to be safe under asynchrony. So a couple of days ago, a team that implemented Casper FFG on top of their Java Ethereum implementation has taken a node and attached it to the network. So here you can see on the first line you have Harmony 1.6 Linux Java 1.8. That is their node. So now there are officially 2 different Ethereum implementations that are both hooked up and participating in the Casper test network. And you can see the difficulties going up. It's creating a bunch of blocks. So basically, things are going well, and we expect that over the next couple of months, more Harmony nodes are going to show up, and hopefully at some point soon, like Go-Geth parity and other Ethereum implementations will also get on top of Casper. I mean, Casper FFG is very explicitly designed to be like as conceptually simple as possible. And both from the point of view of kind of simplicity as a whole, as well as from the point of view of being simple to implement on top of the existing Ethereum chain. So most of the Casper FFG logic actually lives inside of a smart contract, and from there, the logic for actually running a node and the parts that you have to implement client-side are actually fairly simple. So the main steps that are left is basically there's a few changes we want to make to the Casper protocol, and this will basically be probably a second to last round of protocol updates. We're also starting to work with multiple research academic teams on basically reviewing the Casper protocol, trying to formally verify different parts of it, trying to basically prove as like safety, liveness, economic properties as well as we can. And like that process may end up recommending a few parameter changes as well, but like in general, the number of parameter changes that we expect the Casper FFG is actually fairly small at this point. So basically, we just need to also implement it across major clients, test a bunch, audit a bunch, and release. Now, so that's Casper. The good news is it's pretty close. The bad news is it's not extremely close. The other good news is, regardless of how long Casper ends up taking, all of the other stuff that we are doing basically can happen in parallel with Casper, and none of it technically depends on Casper being released. So even if Casper never happens, Plasma is going to happen and sharding is going to happen. So first of all, Plasma, right? So Plasma is this, in this general school of what gets called layer 2 scaling strategies, where the basic idea is that in a layer 2 scaling solution, the base blockchain basically remains what it is, but you change the way that you use the base blockchain. So instead of sending every single transaction on the base blockchain, you would use the base blockchain, so basically the Ethereum chain, to as a kind of home for smart contracts. And each of these smart contracts manages some kind of economic mechanism that allows you to securely make transactions off-chain. So once again, I don't have fancy diagrams because that's Carl's job, but the basic idea is, right, that you have kind of the main chain, and then you have a secondary chain that you call the plasma chain, and transactions happen in the plasma chain by default. So if you want to send transactions quickly, what you would then, at the beginning, you might have some ether on the Ethereum main chain. You would send an on-chain transaction that would send the ETH in the main chain to the Plasma contract, and then your ETH would be stuck inside of the Plasma system, and you would have 5 ETH inside of Plasma. If you want to send transactions and do like make trades, then you can make transactions inside of the Plasma system, and none of those transactions actually needs to go on the main chain. All of it happens off-chain in this other system. And these Plasma chains taken together could easily end up having much more kind of combined scalability and throughput than the Ethereum base chain itself, right? So you can totally have the Ethereum base chain with a capacity of maybe 15 transactions a second, and all of the Plasma chains taken together processing possibly a few thousand transactions per second, possibly more. Right? So the limit to the security of Plasma actually isn't really transaction speed, it's more state size, right? So it's more the number, kind of the amount of off-chain state that you can have, that you can safely have inside of Plasma. So if it's just like a few hundred people that are just trading coins between each other, then technically the scalability of Plasma is basically unlimited. So here we have, basically you have, the main chain, you have Plasma chain, ETH can go into the Plasma chain, and you can have transactions in the Plasma chain, and there exists this mechanism where if you want your Ether back, either because you just need it for something, or because you notice that something wrong started to happen with the Plasma chain, then there's this exit mechanism. You always have the ability to submit an on-chain transaction to exit, and then there exists this priority queue mechanism that Carl will talk about more, which ensures that basically if there is some kind of malicious attack on the system, all of the legitimate users will be able to get their money out before the attacker does. So this is basically what Plasma does. About 2 months ago, I wrote this blog post, this research post about minimal viable Plasma, which is basically a specification for making Plasma be as simple as possible while maintaining all of the basic properties. So this is something that there's already a couple of teams that are working on implementing, and this by itself should be enough to do either a payment system or a decentralized exchange. Now the way minimal viable Plasma works, right, is that there is still a kind of centralized operator. So see, the Plasma contract contains the following data structure as the owner. So minimal viable Plasma assumes there is a centralized operator, but because it's a Plasma system, the power of the centralized operator is limited, right? So the only thing the operator can do is the operator can try to basically either refuse your transactions, and if the operator refuses your transactions, then you would just exit, or the operator can try to cheat by making invalid blocks. But if they start doing that, then everyone will just withdraw, and everyone will be able to get their money out, and the owner will not be able to steal anyone's funds. So now in later versions, of course, you can replace the owner with some MFN system, you can replace it with a threshold signature, you can replace it with a proof of stake algorithm. There's a whole bunch of things that you can replace the owner with that are kind of partially decentralized. I mean, you could even make the owner run on delegated proof of stake. And so this is the purpose of this construction is to just be the absolutely simplest thing that technically actually works and that technically does provide scalability gains. 3 days ago, we came up with another advancement that basically massively reduces the amount of data that each Plasma user has to watch in order to basically ensure that they're not being cheated. So in version 1 of Plasma, if you want to make sure that you're not being cheated by invalid transactions, you as a user would have to download the entire Plasma chain. With this version, you just have to download the portions of the blockchain that are basically specific to coins that you currently control. And there's this mechanism where every coin has a serial number and a transaction spending that coin has to be in a specific position that corresponds to the serial number. And so if you just watch for what's going on at that particular position, then you know that you can't be cheated anywhere else. So this was fairly recent, but this theoretically could increase the scalability of Plasma-like systems even more. One use case that this could work really well for is actually as a wrapper around centralized exchanges. So centralized exchanges are interesting because they have medium state, but extremely high throughput, right? Like every user might have 5, 10, 20 orders active at some time, but orders keep on getting added and removed every second, right? And so with that kind of system, basically, especially with this approach, you could have an exchange that processes hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, and each individual, and the exchange could run on top of a Plasma system, and so if the exchange gets hacked, nobody loses their money. Yay, no more Mount Gox. But the amount of computational load that you're imposing on every user is still fairly small. So this is kind of where we're going with Plasma. There are teams implementing it. This is just a group of devs in Taiwan that started doing it a few weeks ago. There's there are people inside of Omise that are working on this. So Plasma is happening. Right? So part 3 is sharding. So with sharding, sharding is another kind of scaling solution, right? So the nice thing about Ethereum is that we are absolutely not the sort of people who say this is the one scaling solution to rule them all the others are terrible. We basically say, oh, there's great ideas here, there's great ideas here, there's great ideas here. Let's just have people implement all of them at the same time. The community is big, there's lots of developers, lots of teams. Why not just pursue all of them in parallel? And if even one work, then we go up from 15 transactions a second, which is barely enough to handle Uber, to maybe a few thousand transactions a second, which is enough to handle some mainstream payment processing. So sharding is different from Plasma in that Plasma is a layer 2 solution, right? So what that means is that if a Plasma block is invalid, then it's totally possible for the root of that Plasma block to still be published in the main chain, and the main chain just keeps on going. Right? There's just this exit mechanism that basically ensures everyone gets their money back. Sharding is a layer 1 solution, which means that if you have a system where the total state, the entire state of the blockchain, all of the accounts in the blockchain, all of the transactions are spread out across a large number of nodes. And so every single node is only responsible for downloading a small fraction of the incoming transactions, for verifying a small fraction of incoming transactions, and storing a small fraction of incoming state. Nobody needs to store, do, verify, execute, download, upload more than a small fraction of everything. But at the same time, it's tightly coupled. So this is the key difference, right, that makes sharding L1. That it's tightly coupled, which means that if any block in any shard in the blockchain turns out to be unavailable or invalid, then the whole chain is invalid. And the system basically tries really hard to make sure that never happens. So what's the goal here, right? There's a few different goals. So one goal is that we want to process more transactions. The second goal is that we want to avoid increasing node requirements, right? So we want to avoid taking this kind of centralized route where we basically just say, okay, we're going to go up to 50,000 transactions a second. Well, guess what? Every single node that's running the consensus has to verify all 50,000 of those transactions. And so the size of the network, the number of people that can operate nodes that are that large goes down from 25,000 to like, I don't know, like 21 or something. So the, like we basically, consider any system that relies on, like rich people running super nodes kind of unacceptable from a centralization point of view. Goal number 3 is that we want to maintain a crypto-economic and not kind of political or trust-based trust model. So this basically means that like any kind of voting mechanisms, any kind of reliance on different people having unique identities, any kind of reliance on trust graphs is not something that we want to include at Ethereum base layer. It might be good for some layer 2 applications, but not Ethereum base layer. So how do we do this, right? So basically, this is the only way to do it, right? Like, if you want to process more transactions, and you want to process more transactions on layer 1, then blocks have to get bigger. And because of 2 and 3, you can't have one node processing all the data, and so every node has to process only a small portion of all data. Now you might think, well, we've had data grid sharding since the 1980s, right? Like you just have some kind of controller, and then people send, and data gets sent to that controller. You do load balancing. You send some of the requests over here. You send some of the requests over there. You have 50 different servers in different locations. We've had that for 30 years. So why is this hard? Well, the reason why it's hard is basically goal number 3, right? That any kind of sharding system that exists in the context of like traditional centralized applications still assumes that there's basically one guy or one small group of guys that controls all the servers, that can shut the servers down, turn the servers on, edit the server's code, do pretty much anything to the servers. And so it assumes something which is logistically decentralized, but politically totally centralized. And here with a blockchain, we want to have both logistical decentralization and decentralization of control. And so the problem now is that you not only have to have a system where the load is dispersed between different actors, you have to have a system where the load is dispersed between the different actors, and the different actors don't trust each other, and the different actors still have to find out from each other what is the data in parts of the system that they are not personally watching. This, as it turns out, is non-trivial. Who would have guessed? So, turns out it is possible. We believe it is possible. And so the general idea, right, is that you split the blockchain into this kind of number of different, what we call galaxies, or what we call shards, but you can kind of think of them as galaxies. Right, so every galaxy has some accounts. In every galaxy, you have stuff happening between different accounts. So you think of like the accounts as the stars, and the transactions as being like like interstellar battleships moving between the stars, whatever. So like in each galaxy, you have stuff happening, and the galaxies are kind of loosely coupled, right? So if you want, you can have an interstellar battleship go from one galaxy to the other. It'll just take a million years to get there. Except in our case, it's not a million years. It's probably going to be a few minutes to start off, and then we'll try to get it down as much as possible. So the intention here is basically that you have each and every galaxy only gets processed by a small fraction of all nodes. And so you have a few nodes here verifying a few transactions here, a few nodes there verifying a few transactions there, a few nodes there verifying a few more transactions there. Now, then you might ask, well, if there's only a few nodes in each shard, then what stops an attacker from kind of overloading one particular shard and just taking over 90% of the hash power in that shard? Well, solution to that is basically random sampling, right? So nodes are not allowed to choose which shard they work for. Nodes can only deposit their ETH into kind of one big global contract, and then the one big global contract just keeps on assigning them arbitrarily to random shards. And so basically there's no way to target a particular shard for an attack, and so in order to get a majority in any shard, you have to have over something like a third in every shard, in the entire system. So there's one problem with this. The problem is that verifying transactions on a shard requires the state of that shard. So if I have a transaction, and that transaction says 150 Ether goes from Carl to, I don't know, Vlad. Well, in order for me to verify that transaction, I have to know whether or not Carl has 150 Ether to give. Now, if you have nodes that just keep on getting reshuffled between different shards, and you've just been reshuffled to a new shard, then how do you know how much Ether Carl has? So basically, the process of jumping between different shards and gathering all this data that you need to verify transactions is very expensive. So how do we solve this? Well, we've actually realized that there's like a bunch of different ways to solve this, right? I mean, one of them is that you just keep the reshuffling periods very long, but like that's, at least to me, that's not particularly interesting, and it is less secure than like really doing a more complete approach that reshuffles instantly. The first approach is this fairly complex method that we call a stateless client, which basically says that it's the amount of state that any particular node has to store for every shard is just a 32-byte hash. And then if Carl wants to send his 150 Ether, he still has to prove that he has 150 Ether. But instead of me downloading that, as a node downloading that information, it's Carl's job to maintain a verbal proof, to maintain some cryptographic proof that proves that he has 150 Ether, this is part of the current state, and for him to include this inside of transactions. So it's this way of kind of pushing the responsibility of maintaining accounts to the edges. And this theoretically works. It does increase data size requirements by a factor of somewhere between 6 and 20, but it's theoretically works. And it does have some other trade-offs that have to do with basically what if everyone forgets the value of some particular account. So it does have trade-offs, but it is a decent solution. Another thing that we came up with more recently is this kind of separation between state execution and proposal and co-organised. This is somewhat more complicated. Well, it's about as complicated. I can only give summaries of all of these approaches here. The general idea here is basically that we separate out two functions. One function is consensus on blobs of data. So basically, let's say Carl wants to send a transaction, and this transaction sends 150 ETH to Vlad. Then Carl would send this transaction, and I, as a node that happens to be assigned to that particular shard at that particular time, would just see this transaction. Oh look, I got a blob of data. I don't even care whether or not it's valid. I'm going to include it. So that's layer one, right? So layer one of the system is basically nodes that kind of jump around very frequently, that just agree on blocks of data without even caring whether or not the underlying transactions are valid, without really knowing anything about what the underlying transactions mean. The second layer that exists on top is, well, we've now agreed on what the data is. Let's come up with a different and separate scalable protocol, something like TrueBit, but not quite, that allows us to compute what the state is. So basically some light client friendly, a TrueBit-like interactive way that allows any clients to kind of crypto-economically execute the entire state of every shard without actually doing most of the computation themselves. And it's only at that computation layer that you just see, oh look, Carl was trying to spend 150 Ether, his account only has 89 Ether, and so this transaction, we're just going to skip over it. Right? So basically we're going to split this up into two layers. First layer shuffles quickly, just agrees on data. Second layer doesn't really shuffle, and it technically doesn't need to shuffle out for security. And the second layer determines what the data actually means and what the consequences of the data are. So this is roughly the second strategy with sharding. So these ideas are already starting to be under development by multiple different teams around the world. So this is GitHub Ethereum sharding. This is our own people, and there's a company called Prismatic Labs that's been starting to work on a sharding client. So this is basically already, and there's at least two other teams that are starting to work on this as well that will, I think, announce themselves shortly. So this is kind of probably the biggest kind of three strands that have been happening. And on the less technical side, you might also notice that, first of all, Ethereum Foundation is continuing to rapidly expand, continuing to add developers and researchers. But we're also trying to take this kind of community-oriented approach to developing and implementing solutions for all these systems, where we, the Ethereum Foundation, basically don't want to win the market contest for who writes the software that everyone uses, right? Like we tend to see our job as being much more heavy on the research side, a lot on making the best possible protocol, on researching protocol questions, standardizing, having a Python team to write a reference client, but we've started working more and more close. In January we announced a scaling grant program where anyone who wants to make an implementation of Plasma, anyone who wants to try to build a client for sharding, anyone who wants to build some other scaling solution can apply and apply for a grant. And we'll probably announce some stuff about that fairly soon. And there's already quite a few teams just all the way anywhere around the world in the community that are just independently developing their own state channel implementations, Lightning Network implementations, Plasma implementations, sharding clients, whatever, on top of the Ethereum-based chain. So that's a kind of important expansion of the research and development community that has been happening over the last couple of months. Also, we've been in research, as you can tell, it has been speeding up fairly quickly. And we're basically trying to, we basically believe in decentralization, not just as a kind of final goal of what we want to build, but also as a strategy, because we believe that the smartest people and the most driven people are going to be out there, and we want to kind of work with people in basically whatever format they're most comfortable with. So that's where a lot of this Casper, Plasma and sharding stuff is coming from, right? If you want to today, you can totally start building a Plasma implementation, and if it's good, then you can apply for a grant. Go ahead and try, and we hope you do try. So other stuff. So as you can tell, for 2018, we really believe that scaling is a primary focus, and we actually believe that in the short term, scaling is even more important than proof of stake. I mean, proof of stake is clearly important, right? Like I did the math about 2 days ago, and the Bitcoin blockchain consumes about as much electricity as Singapore. But we really need to stop wasting electricity now. So proof of stake is really high on the agenda, but at the same time, there's if the blockchain is not scalable, then people the only thing people will ever be willing to use it for is basically token speculation. And so we really do believe that there is this kind of importance imperative and increasing scalability, really bringing transaction fees way down, so that people can use blockchain applications and benefit from decentralization, even if they're not the sort of user that would literally disappear, get shut down by the government, or just not be possible at all if decentralization did not exist, right? So this is real. Increasing scalability and pushing transaction fees down is absolutely key to achieving wider Ethereum and wider blockchain adoption. So scalability, huge focus. Casper and on scalability focus in multiple directions. State channels, Plasma sharding. Casper proof of stake, very important second focus. There's also other things that we're doing. So improving documentation, high-level programming languages. So people often complain that existing Ethereum programming languages basically are prone to writing bugs in them, that it's very difficult to write code that's secure. Well, first of all, we're continuing to improve Solidity. Second of all, we're continuing to improve Viper, and if you haven't seen Viper, I encourage you to check it out. Vyper.online. You got a nice web compiler right there. And web compiler with a demo. It's really cool. And I'm totally not saying this because I'm the one who created most of Viper, but whatever. But also, like once again, right? We at the Ethereum Foundation do not believe that Ethereum is a product that kind of gets handed down by the foundation to the community, like the same way that like Apple makes iPhones and iPads and iOS, right? Like we highly encourage people to build their own things and even compete with their own official things at pretty much every level of the protocol stack. So in this case, if you are a high-level language, if you are a programming language theory enthusiast, if you're one of those people who thinks the entire world is insane because we haven't switched everything to being functional, if you're the sort of person that has all these crazy ideas about dependent type theory, whatever. If you're the sort of person and you want to build a high-level language for Ethereum, then go ahead, start doing it, right? Like, yes, you can totally compete with Solidity and Viper, and if you outcompete it, then awesome. The state channels. So there's a company called L4 that's been starting to do state channel research. Some of you might have seen on Reddit that Spec Chain recently released some generalized state channel packages. So this stuff is moving forward. Socrates, that's the compiler that creates zero-knowledge proof verifiers, various other kinds of privacy tech, general client optimizations. This is basically all stuff that we're really focused on. So I guess if there's one message that I wanted to take away, that I hope people to take away is that stuff is happening, and stuff is happening in many different directions in parallel, where these directions are all highly complementary to each other. And also, we want to work with you, right? If you have an idea for a layer 2, then great. You can build your own thing and make your own project, and at the same time be part of the Ethereum family. We totally welcome this, and we're very happy to come up with more and more ways to support people that are trying to just do things that help improve interface with, be part of Ethereum. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll take the Q&A after Carl's presentation.
Hello. Love the community focus. I thought about what should I start off this talk by saying, but then I'm just inspired to contribute to Ethereum after hearing all of that. Oh my god, I don't know what to do. But contribute to Ethereum, of course. Anyway, so I'm Carl, and I am going to find carl.tech YouTube channel so that everyone can see. This is a video that I posted quite recently, so if you don't get this talk, then you can watch the video. Now let me find it. There are a couple of videos on Casper here too. Shameless plug. I'm doing this for a reason, by the way. So you can get the slides. There we go. Fastest way to the slides is through promotional content. Okay, great. So that's Ethereum. Plasma, sharding, and Casper. And so today we're going to talk about Plasma. And the exciting thing about Plasma is it is this design principle, architecture, pattern. This is the way that we build blockchains. And it is a kind of new science. People call it crypto economics. It is something that is kind of hard to get your head wrapped around, and there are not enough learning materials out there for how to build these applications. And so this is just the beginning. This is 12 slides. It's not going to, save the world of application development on top of blockchains, but maybe it'll help. So we already got a little bit of an introduction of what Plasma is, but it's a scaling solution. This is how we scale. We put strawberries on a scale. Anyway, Plasma can scale to MVP Plasma. So this is the first, as Vitalik said, this is the first kind of full specification of how one can implement Plasma pretty simply and get a lot of the benefits from the architecture, decentralization, and we'll get into that. So, more than 1,000 transactions per second. I mean, we have 15, 1,000's a big number. Oh, it sounds great, you know. But it does actually improve scalability quite a bit. Of course, it's not the same type of scalability, but whatever. So, strong security guarantees. The first Plasma is a token transfer system. So that basically means you can get your Plasma ETH, essentially. You take your ETH, throw it on the Plasma chain, and now you can transact really fast. And you have these guarantees. Tokens can't be double spent, you know, your normal things. Tokens cannot be withheld, so you can always get them out. And the way you get them out is these exits. So it's these Plasma exits that we talked about earlier. So we're going to get into the full details. It's exciting. This is the key principle. So in a centralized exchange, and Vitalik was talking about this, in a centralized exchange, you send your tokens to that exchange, and now that exchange can get hacked. And if it gets hacked, they can just take your tokens. There's nothing you can do. You can think about minimum viable Plasma in some ways like a centralized exchange where you send your tokens, but if they get hacked or if they start misbehaving, you can always take your tokens out. So this is what this exit thing means. And so something to note is this is just the MVP, and this is not the only kind of use case for these exits or this Plasma architecture overall. Instead, there are many, many token designs, ERC 721, general state channels, and even the architecture that Vitalik hinted at earlier. And you can follow all of these with the Plasma calls. So we actually, every 2 weeks, we have a bunch of Plasma implementers go talk about what we're doing and give everyone an update. And so that's on YouTube, not Carl.tech, Plasma, I think YouTube. Anyway, so here is the Plasma, minimum viable Plasma spec. So we have 3 actors. On the left, we have this Ethereum chain. This is the Ethereum main chain. In the middle, we have a Plasma operator. So this is that central authority. But the exciting thing about this central authority, as we talked about earlier, is it can't do anything. You know, it can't do everything. It is constrained by the rules of the Plasma chain. In other words, it can't steal anyone's money, even though it's central. So if you think about it, like it's a central computer, but it's a decentralized system overall because it maintains these properties. On the left, we have the Plasma chain. Now, take a look. So Plasma contract is deployed on the mainnet Ethereum, so you send your tokens there. And this is a proof of authority Plasma chain operator. So we're going to have 5, normal kind of functioning, the kind of workflow of Plasma right here. And it's going to start off with an operator creating a block. Then we have a new user. Sam is joining the network. Sam sends a bunch of transactions. Then Sam tries to steal some ether, which is not good, and we fight that and we prevent that. So 4 is an attack that we prevent. And then 5 is like the worst attack, where the central operator misbehaves. But we can stop that too, even though it is a central operator. So, let's begin. Plasma operator creates a Plasma block. You will note that this block is not yet included on the main chain. It is instead in the Plasma operator's database. This is a central server with a REST API. This is actually why Plasma is so much fun, because it's so easy to implement. You use a REST API for your nodes. What the Plasma operator then does is sends the transaction over into the Ethereum main chain. And the main chain mines it. And great, we've got this confirmation. So you'll notice that the block went from gray or white to gray. And so that means it's confirmed, it's in the main chain. Now we have our Sam user coming in. So Sam is going to do 2 things. Sam is going to deposit, and that will create a new block on the main chain and give her ETH. So remember, the ETH is the same ETH that's on the main chain and the Plasma chain. It's just all continuous. So deposits 5 ETH into this Plasma smart contract, sends a transaction on the main Ethereum network. This this will immediately mine a plasma block. So a plasma block is really just a hash on the main chain. It's a data structure that's maintained. The main copy is on the main chain. And so when we send this transaction, that transaction is going to go straight into the smart contract and immediately create a new block. And so this secures Sam's funds on the plasma chain. So now Sam is going to start watching the chain for misbehavior. So the client wants to make sure that everything's running properly, and so we'll start watching. And now Alice is going to join. So here we get into Sam sending some ETH. Okay, so Sam is going to send 2,500 transactions just because Sam can, because it's really fast, scalable, awesome. Now, it's going to create a block with all of these transactions, and this is, way more than it could be done on Ethereum main chain. But you'll note that Sam and Alice's balances are not yet updated. And this is because first the block needs to be confirmed. So the block needs to be sent to the main chain and submitted to a miner and mined. Now, here is a little bit of an interesting thing. Sam has to watch to see that the transaction was mined and actually send a confirmation message to Alice. At this moment, Alice has the money. So, here's the interesting thing. This is only one of many Plasma implementations, architectures, designs. And the best Plasma implementation architecture to design for your use case is probably, in your head in some future dimension. So this property where you have to send a confirmation is not necessarily like, okay, Plasma, you have to send a confirmation. No, this is part of the MVP design. But there are many designs, and so we are actually working on one that requires no confirmations at all. And so this is all very flexible. So when I talk about this, think about like, okay, I have an application, there's some kind of state, some scalability, bottleneck. I want to send more transactions than I can. How can I use the similar techniques as Plasma to implement that? So now we are going to see why Plasma is actually special. So far, it just seems like a centralized exchange with extra steps. So here we go. Sam is going to try to exit with 5 PETH. So PETH, by the way, the difference here is ETH is just the main chain ETH. PETH is kind of like the ETH instantiated on the Plasma chain. So Sam is going to claim that she has 5 PETH. And that is, she's going to reference the block that she used to deposit. But the thing is, we have a challenge period. So this is not actually enforced. Like the smart contract wouldn't know better on its own. The smart contract, if naively implemented, would just give Sam the money, which clearly cannot work because that would be stealing money from Alice. So Sam sends this exit transaction, but then Alice notices that the exit transaction was included. So Alice is going to send a challenge. Or, not just Alice, anyone can send a transaction. Just because I didn't want to add a little actor, I didn't put a third person. But, so Alice in this case will send the challenge. Now, the challenge is sent before about a week. This can be tuned, it's, per application. Now, these challenges are basically proofs of inclusion, that there was a transaction in a block that spent the transaction that Sam wanted to take out. And so basically it is a proof that this was an attempted double spend. That is what Alice is telling the main chain. And remember, the main chain is the mediator. The main chain is the one that really we trust, and that's the ETH. That's why ETH is so secure. And the reason why we trust ETH, by the way, is because of proof of work and soon because of proof of stake. So it all comes from this interesting cryptoeconomic recursive trust machine that is Ethereum. Now, the miner mines the exit and pays Alice a security deposit. So when Sam tried to exit, Sam had to actually fund a requirement of the exit is funding the challenger's response. So the challenger will be able to not, you can't send so many exits and make them challenge you for nothing. So Sam's exit is canceled and attack failed, go Plasma. So great, we're halfway there through the attacks. That was one very bad attack that we mitigated. Now the next one is the really scary one. it's the operator creating an invalid block or withholding a block. So essentially, the operator goes rogue. Bum, bum, bum. First, the operator creates an invalid block. Terrifying. The operator now has 9,999,000 ETH. Submits the transaction to the main chain. It gets mined. That is not looking good. So, in a normal setting, right, this is kind of equivalent to the exchange gets hacked and someone steals all the money, right? This would be terrible in a normal case. However, we have Plasma. So, Sam and Alice notice this misbehavior. Sam and Alice will then use their exit transaction to send it to the main chain just in time. However, the Plasma operator is also going to try to exit, right? Everyone wants the ETH, no one wants the PET. The PET is just a placeholder while we transact ETH. And then we get the ETH and we can actually spend it, on the main chain, or at least secure it. We can, of course, spend a PET. So, these exits are processed, but the interesting thing is we don't actually use state transition processing. We're not processing state transitions. Instead, we're processing the order of transactions being included in the main chain. So, look at this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? These are all the blocks, and they correspond on each side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the Plasma chain. What we're going to do is we're going to go block by block. Say, okay, was there a exit that we need to process here? No. Was there an exit that we need to process here? No. Was there an exit here? No. Here is the first time that we need to start sending ETH back, because this is when, Sam was sending all the PET to Alice. And notice that is before the Plasma operator created the invalid block. So the key thing is that Sam and Alice did not move their PET until the invalid block or on an invalid block. The chain was valid all the way up until this transaction. And so the Plasma contract is going to send 2.5 ETH to Sam, and then send another 3.5 ETH to Alice. So now both of them have their ETH. And guess what happens? We're on the next block, and the Plasma operator gets pwned because there is no more ETH in the Plasma contract. So the attack fails. Plasma, go Plasma. Amazing. So that was our exciting journey into Plasma attack defense response. And the crucial thing is that there is this attack defense response, right? We're able to trust a Plasma chain in a way that we haven't been able to trust other central operators before. And that's because we have recourse built into the protocol for what we do when a central actor misbehaves. This is critical. So trust is established by limiting the central authorities' action, what they can do, and imposing constraints, and the right constraints, aligning incentives. And this is really important because before, with a centralized exchange, the only thing holding a centralized exchange, hostage and not to steal all the money is like this social credit or the government action that would happen if the exchange stole everyone's money. And there are some sketchy exchanges, and you put your money and you're like, I don't know if I'm ever getting anything out. But this gives you guarantees no matter who they are, because you can audit that the code has been written properly. Very exciting. And so we get to store minimal information on the main chain, which allows us to scale up the transactions, and we have this threat of recourse that we are able to use to keep the central actor in check. So I don't actually have a thank you slide in these slides because they're for the web. But thank you so much. That was Plasma MVP. Please contribute to Ethereum. Actually, before I go, I'm just going to reinforce what Vitalik said. The whole reason why I'm explaining this, right, is because we have this secret information that will allow us to create systems that didn't exist before. We weren't able to design these incentives to constrain central authorities so that they only act in ways that we want them to. But now we do, and so we need a lot of people to understand this knowledge and use it so that we can actually build a constrained world. Ethereum is not about, Ethereum, even the token. It's about this mentality of how do we create a better world through aligning incentives, and that's the key. So please do get involved. There's a lot to do. Thank you.
so we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Just try to keep your questions as technical as it gets. From last experience, we have people hanging banners and stuff, but luckily there's no ledge this time. But anyway, yeah, any questions, please do shout out. I'll be repeating a question or even censoring them if any, yeah, because of the live stream audience. So, yeah. Yes.
So Mike from DataStream X, two questions. One, does it only work for Plasma? Does it only work for Ether or ERC20 tokens also be submitted? And two, is it on the Plasma chain, do you also deploy smart contracts, or is it only just with the transfer class?
Sure. So the question was, can we use ERC 720, or can we use ERC 20, all the tokens? The answer to that question is absolutely. So there are already very super simple ways to trade. You put the MVP works for tokens just like it works for ETH. There's really not much of a difference, and it also works for things like CryptoKitties, ERC 721. And the second question would be, is this possible to be done with state transitions, general state transitions? And so the answer is there's active research on how to kind of like use an EVM in Plasma chain, but it gets a little bit more complicated because you have to approve state transition. But anyway, active area of research. Please do contribute, and you can see on the Plasma call progress.
In the paper for there were, so I have two questions. The first is, they mentioned a kind of efficient way to do master withdrawal, master exit, using master routes and GitHub. I was looking at elaborating on that. And then also, what is going to be the top one?
Yeah, so I think the general idea is that you can have like some kind of like bitmap data structure of like basically what are the UTXOs that are currently available. And then there could be some mechanism where if lots of people try to withdraw at the same time, then that basically, like you can basically pull the entire bitmap to chain and then let everyone exit and like take the coins out at pretty much any point afterwards. So the general goal here is that like if you have a Plasma system that has a really huge number of users, then there's this problem that if the Plasma chain does get attacked, there might literally not be enough block space to allow all of the honest guys to exit before the attacker can start taking money out. And we fix this by coming up with some kind of mechanism where there's some kind of trigger, and there's lots of ways to do this, where if that trigger gets hit, then either you extend the timelines or you put like basically take some kind of like bit-based data structure or some data structure, put it to chain so that you have all of the information about who has the ability to exit immediately. That's the general idea. What was the second part?
What if somebody is offline?
Oh, somebody is offline. Okay, so in Plasma, there is basically there's some kind of withdrawal period, and like in the minimal viable Plasma doc, I set it to 2 weeks. And basically the exit priority queue mechanism, it's not a priority queue of when you withdraw, it's a priority queue of when the UTXO was created. And there's a rule that like basically as long as you withdraw within like the withdrawal window divided by 2 of when the attack starts, then like you can still do the exit and your UTXO will still get prioritized over the attack. So like as long as you log on at least once a week, you're fine.
What would you change about the non-fungible token standards, if anything, and why?
I mean, for non-fungible and fungible ones, I would say my main wish right now is that like the way that you can use tokens as a fee for contracts doesn't really work well, because it's like you first call a contract with the token to approve, and then you call another then you call your actual contract, and your actual contract calls the token, and like it's kind of overcomplicated. You have this kind of like A to B to A to C to B loop, and it requires filling up storage, so it's fairly gas inefficient. So like some kind of structure where basically I call a token and then the token calls the recipient, and then you have like some API mechanism for taking those cases into account, I think could work better. Like that, I do remember that I did oppose this idea earlier because I found it more complicated, but like there are a lot of legitimate efficiency reasons to support it, and especially in the context of sharding, when you'll need a lot more kind of asynchronous computation, it really starts making more sense.
That's right. Has any way to deal with double spending within
Sure. So within the Plasma network, you are checking to see that each block is valid, and so if there is an invalid block, then it's like one of those, the operator misbehaving, and so you would exit your coins. And the other question, rating, difference or similarities, basically. This is a different construction. It's in some ways super simple. I don't know, Vitalik, what do you think?
So the main difference between plasma-like systems and channel-like systems is that plasma-like systems, or sorry, channel-like systems work by kind of having these different like separated islands where each island has a very small number of participants, and the state inside of each island can only move forward by unanimous consent. So what that means is that you basically have to have like 10 ETH locked in a channel between you and Bob, and a separate 10 ETH locked between a channel between you and Charlie. So like the collateral requirements end up getting fairly high. You can't just say, oh, I have 10 ETH inside of the system, I can send it to literally just about anyone. Whereas in a plasma system, you can. The trade-off, though, is that in a state channel system, confirmations can be instant, whereas in a plasma system, you basically have to wait until the block gets pushed into the blockchain and the block gets confirmed for a confirmation.
Sorry, is there any questions at the back of the room? Anyone? Okay, yeah.
Hello, my name is Robin. I have a hypothesis question. Is that if you had the shredding and the plasma all implemented together, and you mentioned that in shredding you might have the risk that the chain might not be mined or forgotten. But at the same time, you really open the plasma channel and that chain happens to be the closing of the plasma channel. Would that channel be open forever?
So like in general, right, like the way we're designing sharding is that if a chain has some data invalid or unavailable, then that chain just should be invalid full stop, right? So if like that kind of scenario should only be possible basically if there's some kind of successful group 51% attack. And in later versions of sharding, even in that case, it would be very difficult to do most of the time because of like data availability proofs and things. So like the goal of sharding is that you have a chain that like a base chain that you with much higher capacity that you just can trust to be available. And then if you have plasma, then like if you have plasma on top of it, then great, and you can have even more transactions in the plasma chains.
So you will have problem closing the channel?
And you know you should not.
How would the gas fees work?
So there are, okay, so if you want to deposit, you have to pay main chain gas. If you want to withdraw, you have to pay main chain gas. Transactions inside of the system would probably have like some kind of fee mechanism that's defined by the plasma system. So like you could just have each transaction like have some kind of fee as well as UTXOs. You could also have transaction fees kind of not be part of the protocol, but then just have every participant open a channel so they get to the plasma operator and pay transaction fees in a channel. There's a bunch of ways to do it.
Hi, Vitalik. I've all seen the very basic side of the about the token use case, like the ERC20 token ICOs, and about the non-fungible token use case. You see, in the near future, there will be like a pooling for all those non-fungible tokens. And also another thing is, have you heard about the ERC case and the back?
Hold on, what's your first question about non-fungible tokens?
Use cases. In the near future, there will be a lot of non-fungible token use cases, just like the ICO use case for fungible tokens.
Sure, so digital asset ownership is absolutely going to be a big thing. Currently, we don't really kind of feel like we own a lot of things on the internet, and so with the ERC 721, you can see conceptually, like of course video game items, but really it's just like does everyone agree that you have a particular object in virtual space? And that is like we have this consensus formation mechanism, and now we can go from having just kind of we can really feel like we own a chair in virtual space or own a sword in virtual space in a very real way. And that's why you did see this crazy explosion I mean, some of it was a little bit just crazy with the CryptoKitties, but there is absolutely a future there. Hodl your ERC 721s. No, we'll see how exactly it all plays out. No way to know for sure, but it is a big deal.
Have you heard about the 875 inside of the Senate?
No.
I have two questions. The first question is about proof of work, proof of stake. I wonder whether you address this
Yeah.
So the first question is the equality issues between moving from proof of work to proof of stake.
You do it.
Great. So, this is a fantastic question, and this is kind of related to that centralized actor that was constrained in the talk, right? So, in proof of stake, we're currently using proof of work, which relies on an external scarce resource, and that is energy. So the more energy you have, the more votes you can make on the main chain. But now we're moving to proof of stake. And in this case, the more ether you have, the more votes you have on what is the main chain. But the interesting thing is, in the first case, where it's an external resource, we don't, as protocol developers, have any control over that market. We have no control over what happens when there is, for instance, a 51% attack. However, in the proof of stake case, because the tokens are within our protocol, we are able to impose constraints that would be otherwise impossible in the proof of work setting because it's an external resource. So in our proof of stake protocol, which is called Casper, if there are two conflicting chains that are finalized, we have a guarantee that at least 1/3 of all total deposits will be slashed. And this is something, it's essentially, if it would be equivalent to, in proof of work, if there was some big 51% attack, that we would be able to burn down some ASIC farms, right? So there's a whole number of reasons why proof of stake gives us these guarantees and gives us more tunability that allows us to innovate over proof of work. That doesn't even address all of the energy saving concerns, and that doesn't even address a number of things. And it's not to say that proof of work doesn't have a place, but it is certainly the case that for the Ethereum grand vision, it makes a lot of sense to use proof of stake.
Have you addressed the arguments that, like, from an egalitarianism point of view, basically one guy produces over half the Bitcoin mining hardware?
That is another point, yes. Centralization over the Bitcoin mining hardware. One person. Yeah, I need to throw these statistics more. That was a good one.
The second question.
My second question is, under the aspect of plasma, it sounded that you tried to introduce some sort of algorithm plasma operator by having a proof of work. So it's something you have decentralization and centralization. But my question is, are you going to do KYC on the operator?
So regarding the governance,
So there's different ways in which Plasma can be used, right? Like in general, Plasma basically allows any system kind of to live and do things off of Ethereum while still having Ethereum-backed guarantees. So this could be used by centralized actors. So for example, I fully support centralized exchanges wrapping their entire systems in Plasma so that if they get hacked, basically Mt. scenarios don't happen and people get their money back. In which case the exchange is a centralized entity and the exchange would basically still be required to do the same KYC it's always done. There are also ways of using Plasma where you're basically just creating another blockchain network. So you're creating a kind of separate blockchain that just happens to be sort of anchored into Ethereum for security. So, and that central blockchain could itself be run by something like proof of stake. So that's what Amisago is doing, for example.
Yeah, so you can do the proof of stake, but the key thing is at least one thing is, this is all in some ways about governance, and really what Plasma allows us to do is it allows us to define these economic rules, which allows us to coordinate better and trust people more. And so in that way, it is, each one of these is how do we self-govern ourselves, but without trusting an almighty authoritarian central authority.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one last question. Yeah.
Is Plasma to subject to the DD problem?
So basically, it is possible for the Plasma operator to create blocks that are unavailable, but Like it's only the participants in the Plasma chain. So basically, everyone who has coins inside of Plasma that's responsible for watching the Plasma chain for data unavailability. So like, if the users see that from their own point of view the data is unavailable, then they can just exit. So the rest of the users of Ethereum who have nothing to do with that Plasma chain are not responsible for the data availability of the Plasma chain. So you don't like get any scalable data availability verification issues.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank Carl and Vitalik again. Thank you everyone for turning out today. So I have a couple of people to thank for actually making this event very possible. I was contacted by Vitalik only late last week regarding this event, and thank you very much to SUSS, Digix team as well here, and the Block Asset crew, as well as the building sponsor. So, just one last thing, do not mock him for selfies. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, guys.